All right, so let's start with kind of looking at this pose for head construction. So first thing, really at this point you can choose. You could do an egg, you can do an oval. It's entirely up to you. Remember, I'm gonna start out pretty light, pretty scratchy. So we do our shape for the cranial mass, and then for the mandible and jaw. So that what I'm looking to get is 2/3 to 1/3 relationship between them to get my overall head height. And then maybe when we're doing this one, we could try to give a more refined address to the certain elements that we build up so that it looks more feminine. And then the chin is a great place to start too, because there's going to be a difference there. So here's my perspective line. I changed it. First time I kind of got it wrong. I thought we were over, and then I double checked the brow to the ear. The female chin is different because it's more of a recessive angle, a curved angle. Men will always be geometric or more stair step, and that's just testosterone affecting the development of the bone. So two things. I want this to be a gradual or kind of softer development in terms of the protrusion of the chin. And then I'm also going to cheat and show you a little bit underneath. I think there is some there. It's just subtle. Male jaw here would be strong, rectangular. So not strong, vertical, angular, more boxy. Whereas a feminine jaw is going to have at the angle of the remus, so this back portion to your mandible, more of a gradual shift and turn. So something like that. And so if you want to change character type, right? Because remember, this is meant to be objective so that you can feed into it whatever result you want. You just move this line, just push it back that way, and you'll get a male figure. So proportions now. So this is my symmetry line. It's pretty far over there. This is almost profile. And the other thing I think you should do, or at least get started thinking about, is the neck. So I'm putting my clavicle, this is just the volume of the throat to start out, and then I'd wrap muscles around that. So halfway between brow and chin is nose. Halfway between nose and brow is the socket. Halfway between the socket and the brow is the eye. Hopefully that all sounds, like a broken record, and it's now ingrained in your subconscious so that when you sleep, you just kind of hear that repeated. What's different in female foreheads? So like in men, the brow ridge is going to get an extra development of what's called the superciliary arch. So that's this, just a little kind of piece that hugs the top of your glabella. And then this whole ridge of your brow is going to be a lot more pronounced. So that. Also, female foreheads are vertical or tend toward the vertical. Male foreheads tend toward more of a diagonal or recessive plane. So, and then that goes just to the hairline. Remember, hairline isn't really a thing. It's not a measurement. So you're going to have to be lenient if you're seeing people that don't have hair. Like, I'm slowly headed in that direction, not even that slowly. What you're really looking for is the moment when the forehead changes to the top of the head. And that gives you a very immediate plane break all the way around the head. So if I pull that back, everything above that line, that imaginary line, is round. Everything below that imaginary line is concave, and in some areas just flat. So that's where we're looking to get our side plane too. So put that in. And then let's use this as a subtractive design. I'm cutting out what would be a rounded sphere form. So this could be flat. Here's our ear. I don't know, but we probably didn't spend a whole lot of time talking about the ear. So I'll draw one over here to the side just to give you a little symbolic way to break it down. So again, let's draw a profile. So it's usually just a C curve. I would keep it as a simple C curve so you can study variation. So something like this, but you could really change that shape to anything. And some books that I've referenced talk about the ear having 5 planes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And by looking at these specifically, it's actually a good tool to judge the particulars of an individual. Some people have maybe shorter or longer or different angles to the specific plane changes of the ear. The other pieces inside you're going to want is, once I have the outside structure, then I'll just bring a big kind of rhythmic mirroring of the outside form down. And then as I get towards the bottom or the 5th plane, I'll just create a big sphere shape. And that would be the lobe, the structural cartilage of the lobe. And then inside of this, you can do, like I'll usually create a little sphere here and then a little sphere here. So a lot of books show that there's a Y. So that Y would be like this, and that would go right in here. I prefer looking at the negative space, kind of the pockets that the Y creates. The Y itself would be more of a raised form. And you can just kind of look at your own ear for that. And then within that, I'll create a little C, and then, this would be the area of where the auditory meatus would be. So those are my pieces. It's basically just to break it down into parts. A C that can have 5 planes, plus a Y or 2 spheres. And then inside, I made a little C and then a triangle pointing at it. And that was this part and this part. Right, so you could see all those elements in her, right? They're just of a different kind of shape. The only other thing that you could do is just kind of bring another line in through here so it separates that cartilage, but I don't know, that seems a little much. Okay, so we're this far. Now let's create our cheek. So I'm looking for the auditory area, top of the jaw, and then we're gonna make a central plane that goes just under the temple, and then it would end halfway between the nose and the socket. And this is where your masseteric ridge or zygomatic major, just your cheekbone is. So that's the part, like if you touch the side of your face, you could feel pushing out. And then from here, I'm going to make 2 more lines. One that goes to the temple, and then from that same area, bottom, one that goes just outside of where the modiolus, which is the corner of your mouth. So that goes right here. So this is trying to show in a simplified way, as simple as I can make it, the planar tiered structure to your cheek. And so this comes out and away from what would be a flatter plane here. This is the leveled structural plane of the cheek. And then because this is starting to roll back under, this is a plane going in. And to give you maybe an anecdote that could help you remember this as a plane. So this is also highly related and dependent to your teeth, what the structure of your teeth look like, or the prominence of your denture sphere. And in the 20s, women used to, as a form of kind of early plastic surgery, actresses or people like that would have their back molars removed because it created a greater concavity, which emphasized the prominence of the cheekbone. So if you wanted to get your cheekbones to look really high or kind of dramatic and with a full turn to them, then one way to accomplish that would be to remove your back molars. And so it was a common kind of practice. All right, so now I'm just going to clean up the jaw a bit. And now let's start working more so into the sockets. Get a little closer for that. So again, I'm not really looking for likeness in this one. We're just going for planes. So first thing is going to start with the keystone. If I were to look at hers, it's very elegant, kind of smooth. So I'm not going to make real abrupt plane changes or angular shifts too much if I were to match her likeness. I want the brow to feel like it's folding. So we're going to make it rise to that center point and then fall back down. And then let's show the depth of the socket. And this is something you also have to determine. So everybody can have a unique depth to their socket. Some people have really deep set sockets, some people not so much. And then sometimes it can be made more or less prominent by the structural fat of the face. Like she's a young woman, so a lot of the malar fat or the fat around the eyes does a lot of work to soften everything that we're seeing there. So I'm just going to go with this. And then from my socket structure, I'm looking to get that approximate kind of glasses feel. So then what I'm looking for on this, so these are both planes that go back. So they would be in shadow if I hatch it. And then for my nose, so I'm ready to start working on that. I have my keystone, so I know that's where it's starting. Here's the base of the nose. So this is where it's flush with the skull shape. And now I'm going to sight the best of my ability where the cartilage ends. And so I see it just kind of breaking the profile of the cheek. So it's like right here for me, and that might even be a little bit far. So once I'm happy, I'll settle on that and then bring the outsides of the area of the nose and converge those towards whatever the tip of the cartilage is. So you have some likeness control here where you can get a width and a width. And then let's connect it back up. And she has a very kind of slow kind of curve to her nose, which is really a pretty curve. So if I decide that, like let's say that's my curve for the nose, I'm just going to make this one the exact same for now. I don't want these to look different. Then, so we'd have the, well, I guess pun intended, I'm going to eyeball it here, what the size of that shape should be, and then a little bit of cheek. Common problem with heads, we're making the noses meet at a triangle. So I don't want this, don't want to do this like that, because then all of this gets flattened. So I always want to drop the nasal structure back onto the cheek. And that should be a close parallel to whatever the depth of the nose is there. So now we have our side and top. Placing the eye, what kind of things do I need to place the eye? What points? this is the center, and then I'm going to use the corner of the nose and the mouth. So I'll bring those up, and these would give me the center of the eye left to right, and this is where it ends. It's the inside corner of the eye. So I just take whatever this is and then copy it, use that same distance, copy it there, and that would be how you could give an accurate placement to where the eye should be. But again, everybody's eye changes. It's not always going to be perfectly the same. So that's there, that's done. But why this is a useful line, if you wanted to have, I'm sure the last thing you guys want to do is more structure, but a cool proportion for the skull is that if you bring this cheekbone, so this is the side, if I turn it and I'm thinking this is across the front, this ends right here. So you can just kind of create a little curve right here, and that's where your cheekbone starts to integrate into the structure of the nasal aperture and then your denture sphere. So that would be a really precise way to observe where your denture sphere changes. Now I'll do the mouth. So for the longest time, I would just kind of ignore the mouth and the nose because they're boring. But when we think about faces, I think most people probably respond to thinking about likeness as a consequence of the eyeball, right? So something like that. There's a great book that came out recently by James Nestor called Breathe, which is just about different studies and thinking and the physiology of breathing. There's even been articles that came out this week on how there's microevolution in humans where some babies are being born without molars. And a lot of that is because of the change in our denture sphere because of our radical change in diets. And the breath book, or the book and practices on breathing, are all about trying to get people to breathe through their nose again. A lot of people's nasal areas or cavity has either become constricted or collapsed because of the change in our denture sphere. So again, we used to like gnaw on things and we would have to kind of exercise way more force to chew than we currently do today. And so our palate, or the whole of our denture sphere, has started to condense or compress. And that's why, children are now being born without wisdom teeth. Sorry, that's what I meant. So that's my anecdote about kind of my learning about the importance of the mouth and kind of taking a secondary interest in it. So by finding this line, that gives you the canine. That's where your palate or your denture sphere changes from being something that's more front facing to being something that's more side facing. So that'd be a pretty noticeable moment in terms of the change of plane or form. And then the back teeth come from the skull, the lower teeth come from the mandible. Right, so I'm trying to show here a separation in plane. And then for the chin, I'm just gonna show an overlap that this denture structure is on top of something, and then we're gonna push this back so it feels more like her. To kind of quickly address stuff in the neck, so behind your chin, you can find your hyoid bone, which looks like a little staple. And then at the front corners, there are little loops, and those are tendons, and muscles of your lower jaw are redirected through those. So that's something you could find. That explains, or that would be the explanation for how the skin and muscle pull from your jaw to that point. And these are two different muscles. And in the back right here, there's a gland that creates all of your saliva. And then underneath this directly is your thyroid cartilage. And both men and women have this, and this kind of drops down to the pit of the neck. On top of this is a muscle that just pulls the hyoid bone. So if we draw it from the front, I always remember it because it looks like this attaches to your sternum, and then it has these two little shapes come off. So it looks like the Atari logo, but that's what's happening here, is you have that basic shape and pattern there. And then some of these big shapes like this one here, so that's your sternomastoid. Remember, women tend toward having a smaller mastoid process, which is that little design of bone that takes place right before your ear. And that explains the sometimes smaller depth to this muscle, which also explains why women sometimes have a thinner, more elegant neck. So that's the other side. And then back here, that's the trap, trapezius. And that's what controls the upward motion of your shoulder. And then in between, so you can see where that shadow is, there's a little teardrop shape. And these are your secondary muscles, so muscles that don't show very well through the skin. But there's a number of them, 4 or 5, that are clear. What these muscles do is attach your throat to your shoulder. So you have muscles going from the neck to the back, from your throat to your scapula. And then there's one really cool muscle that I'll draw that maybe we've talked about before. And so like I think of wrestlers especially because I grew up watching wrestling, whenever, Hulk Hogan or Macho Man were yelling at people, there's always like a lot of spit and sweat, and then there was a lot of like lines or what look like veins kind of happening here. And that's from a big muscle that we all have called your platysma. And so imagine, like, from the corner of your mouth, what you end up having is this long sheet that comes out across your neck like this, and then down across your clavicle and even onto the top of your chest. And so it doesn't really sit under much except for epidermis, but when you use it, and it's always in that kind of angry face, so it's when the corner of your mouth is really pulled back and down in a super exaggerated way. And if you're having a hard time connecting with what I'm saying, just do this face in the mirror so that you can see. These are teeth, by the way. That this action pulls that muscle up, and what that muscle pulling up as a plane ends up doing is lifting the skin off the neck. Okay, so I think that one's mostly done. Like structure, talked about some extra muscle, a little bit of information on the ear.
Want to learn from Michael? Check out his Introduction to Figure Construction and Head Construction courses on Proko.com. Both courses have hours of demonstrations, lectures, and student critiques. If you're interested, click on the links in the description. Thanks.